Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to dive into something pretty incredible, that amazing organ sitting between your ears. We're talking about your brain and a fundamental rule that it lives by.
Now, this quote you're looking at, this is really the heart of everything we're talking about today. And listen, this isn't just some motivational saying you'd see on a poster. It's a hard scientific reality. The stakes for our brain's health are, well, incredibly high, and it all comes down to one simple, powerful idea. And that brings us to the rule itself. Use it or lose it. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's something you hear at the gym, right? But in the world of neuroscience, this is way more than a catchy phrase. It's a fundamental law that pretty much explains how our brain either thrives or, sadly, how it declines.
Okay, so what's really cool about this is how it completely busts a huge myth we all kind of have about our brains. We tend to think of the brain like a machine, Like, as long as you don't break it, it just stays the same. But the reality is, that's not how it works at all. The brain is a living, breathing, dynamic system. Just like a muscle that shrinks and weakens if you stop using it, your brain's abilities will literally fade away if they're not being actively put to work.
So you might be wondering, okay, how does this actually happen? I mean, what's the physical mechanism that lets our brain change based on what we do or don't do? Well, it all comes down to its incredible lifelong ability to literally rebuild and restructure itself. The fancy scientific name for this is neuroplasticity, and honestly, you can just think of it as your brain's ultimate superpower. It's the biological process that allows us to learn anything new, to form memories, and to adapt to our world. It's really the foundation of who we are and who we can become.
And this little phrase right here, it perfectly explains the use it part of the equation. Way back in 1949, a neuroscientist named Donald Hebb came up with this. And it's so simple, right? Every single time you learn a new skill or even just think a new thought, specific brain cells, neurons, they fire up. The more they fire together, the stronger their connection gets. They literally wire themselves together to build a faster, more efficient network.
But what about the other side of the coin, the lose it part? Well, that's where a process called synaptic pruning comes in. You can think of your brain as a super efficient gardener. It's constantly looking around for neural pathways that are weak or just aren't being used anymore, and it actively snips them away. It prunes them. If you don't use a path, the brain clears it out to make room for something that you are using.
So why is the brain doing all this constant construction and demolition? Building things up and tearing them down? The reason is actually surprisingly simple, and it all comes down to one thing: managing a massive energy bill.
Just to put this in perspective, take a look at this. The brain is remarkably small. It only makes up about 2% of our total body weight. That's it. In the grand scheme of things, it's got a tiny physical footprint.
But, and this is the part that will blow your mind, that tiny 2% organ consumes a staggering 20% of your body's total energy. It's an absolute energy hog. It is by far the most metabolically expensive piece of biological real estate you own.
So synaptic pruning is really just the brain's brilliant energy-saving strategy. It's expensive to maintain all those neural circuits, especially the ones that are just sitting there collecting dust. So by trimming them away, the brain optimizes its resources, making sure that all that precious energy is going only to the connections that matter most, the ones you're actually using.
Okay, so if the brain is constantly deciding what to keep and what to get rid of, what's the secret sauce that tells it to grow and strengthen connections? Well, let's talk about the fertilizer for your brain.
This special fertilizer is a protein, and its star player is called BDNF, which stands for Brain-Derived Neurotrophic Factor. I know, it's a mouthful, but don't worry about the name. Just think of this stuff as Miracle-Gro for your brain cells. It's literally the molecule that tells your neurons to grow, to survive, and to build new, strong connections.
And here is the absolute best part. We have a ton of control over our BDNF levels. It's not just random. As you can see, things like active learning, solving problems, and physical exercise all crank up its production. And on the flip side, the things that make your BDNF levels plummet are exactly what you guess: mental laziness and what we call passive consumption. This is the difference between, say, mindlessly scrolling through a social media feed versus actually wrestling with a tough idea. One is mental junk food, the other is a gourmet meal for your brain.
Okay, so we get the biology now, right? We know the why. So let's get practical. Let's put this knowledge into practice with some scientifically proven training methods. Here it is, a clear, actionable toolkit. Number 1, novel learning. Learning something totally new, like a language or an instrument, is like the ultimate trigger for neuroplasticity. 2, active thinking.
Don't just absorb information, play with it. Try explaining it to someone else. Always ask why. 3. Challenging repetition. Practice your skills, but always nudge the difficulty up just a little bit. That's the sweet spot. 4. Physical exercise. This is like a biological cheat code that directly boosts that amazing BDNF. And finally, number 5, limit that passive entertainment. You gotta swap out the mental junk food for activities that actually build your brain.
So let's bring all this home. The key takeaway here isn't to feel guilty about scrolling or watching TV. It's about understanding that our brains are governed by a powerful and, frankly, inescapable biological law.
I really want this idea to sink in because it reframes everything. We tend to think cognitive decline is just an inevitable part of getting older, but so much of it actually comes down to how we choose to use or not use our minds every single day. It's about use, not just time.
And here is the most hopeful, most empowering message of all. Because of neuroplasticity, it is never, ever too late. Your brain never loses its ability to change, to grow, and to rebuild. The moment you start challenging it again, it will respond. It's ready to go whenever you are.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. Now that you know how your brain really works, the question isn't whether you can build a better brain, the question is how you'll choose to do it. So what about today? How are you going to fertilize your brain?